everybody. Hi. Such a nice energy in here. Thank you for having me, Jordan. Love you, man. All right. I met my first soulmate in 1984. I was 14 years old. She was hanging out with my sister at the time, but I'd been eyeing her. So much brown leather, sexy trim, big snaps. She had broad shoulders, narrow hips. That signature 80s upside down triangle silhouette that I longed for. We had it all. One day when my sister was out of town, I made her my own. And afterwards, I hid her in my closet. She was a rare, perfect jacket. Tight at the thigh, but somehow blousy at the top. She was pure 80s magic. She was my first feel-good jacket, and I spent the next 30-something years chasing that same high. I never felt safe growing up. I won't get into the novel that was my childhood, but honestly, I didn't really think that I would live long enough to be here on a stage at 49 years old during Pride Month in NYC, especially considering that when I came out to my parents at 15, I just got a hard no and nothing else. But I was still a tomboy, dressed as a pretty princess, taking every chance I could get to feel good in my presentation, like getting to wear proper tailored jackets riding horses. And during Gender Switch Day of Spirit Week in high school, I got to rock a Wall Street James Spader style suit with suspenders. And every time someone would die, I got to wear my long black suit jacket that covered 70% of my body to the funeral. I remember this one summer, I borrowed my friend's older brother's jacket while he was away. It was acid wash denim, traditional men's Levi's style, total George Michael vibes. And it was almost impossible to give it back. I was always on the search for that one jacket that would finally make me feel like me, which is something up until 4 years ago I had really never felt. I was full-blown dependent on jackets. Convinced it was just a matter of being in the right place at the right time with the right amount of money available on my credit card. And they all went through the same excruciating checklist. Will this jacket give me broader shoulders? Will this jacket give me more narrow hips? Will it hide my D-cup bosoms when I want it to? It wasn't simply about presentation. It was more about protection and preservation. And by the time I turned 40, I was living in a studio apartment on the Upper East Side with a tiny closet full of soulmates. Twill jackets, tweed jackets, leather jackets, pleather jackets, silk jackets, an assortment of denim jackets in various washes, double-breasted jackets, single-button jackets, belted jackets, mesh jackets, sheer jackets, short-sleeve jackets, post-apocalyptic asymmetrical jackets, embroidered jackets, sequin jackets. I was literally living in a studio full of jackets, but still, none of them were quite right. I would double them up, try different combos, buy every single color possible, layers. It just wasn't right, and it just wasn't me. As my dependency on jackets intensified, my romantic relationships with people mostly sucked. Probably because my relationship with myself was in flux, even though I wasn't fully aware of the disconnect at the time. But I was finally consciously leaning into my masculinity. I started owning my natural walk with still hips and wide legs and my shoulders broad. I wore Oxfords and brogues. I let go of my collection of heels. I cut my hair. I stopped wearing makeup. I was drawn to all things butch. I was a fierce advocate for the trans community. I worked as a stylist and a personal shopper, and I was witnessing all these other people have their aha moments in their clothes. And I just kept being like, that's so awesome, that's so great. or them. It's never gonna happen for me. You know, some women would just never be happy in their bodies, and I guess I'm just one of them. And then I got good health insurance for the first time in a long time. And with a genetic predisposition to estrogen-fueled cancers, a long history of needing biopsies and MRIs, never knowing if this would be the time that they would say those dreaded words, I opted to get a preventative double mastectomy. And when it came time to discuss reconstruction, it was super clear to me that I really didn't want them back. Yes, it was more pragmatic. Reconstruction can be a longer, more intensive recovery process, but this was something more. I was actually shocked at how indifferent I was to having breasts. I was literally like, no boobs, no problem, man. I had no need for breasts on myself. And don't get me wrong, because I love titties. I just don't want them attached to me. Of course, it took me a full year of trying to convince my surgeon to keep me flat. She was afraid I would later come back, change my mind, and sue her. But I just was like, nope, I demand that flat be on the menu. That surgery was 4 years ago, in June 2015. The recovery was long and arduous and a little complicated, but by week 3, once the drains were out and the swelling had gone down and my stitches were unwrapped, I knew what I had to do. I slowly, with great effort, walked my tired ass to my closet to see all my loves. I grabbed my go-to pinstripe jacket. She was one of my longest relationships. We spent a joyous night together in '97 at a Halloween party where I was dressed like Robert Palmer and my date was dressed like his backup singer. I gingerly put her on, and she no longer fit. It was no longer my jacket, and it wasn't my body. There was this empty space where my D-cups used to be. The bust seams, they just puddled over my chest in a very not sexy way. We didn't belong together anymore. And that was actually perfect. I took off that jacket and I felt safe in that moment. And not just safe from the looming unknown death energy of potential cancer that my breasts had been carrying for so long, but also felt safe just as me, without breasts. And a lot of you are probably listening to this story like, yes, that's what you needed to do to find your truth in your gender identity. And yes, you're right. But also, I didn't know that it was about my gender identity at the time. There was nothing in my emotional or psychological vocabulary up to that point that had challenged my actual gender as part of my self-expression. But there I was, staring at this new body, and I realized that the whole search for that jacket, that chasing that high and trying to find this thing that would make me feel more like me, was maybe me unconsciously advocating for a gender I didn't even know I wanted yet. And I was really grateful for something in me pushing me not to reconstruct. Because taking away my breasts ended up giving me everything my life had been missing. I still have my fair share of jackets, I'm not gonna lie. But now I feel like me when I wear them. And I feel like me when I wear button-downs. And I feel like me when I wear t-shirts. And I feel even more like me on testosterone. And this whole time, I thought I was a big dyke who was just trying to avoid breast cancer. And little did I know, I was actually a trans, masculine, non-binary person who didn't want breasts at all. I met my first soulmate in 1984, but I met my truest, authentic self 4 years ago, and I've never looked back.